What's going on, guys? It's Mohammed, the host of Aware Alpha, and welcome to episode. I actually don't know which number we're at. I think it's like 70, 71. And just want to say, how grateful I am. Grateful for the listeners and everyone that's listening to the podcast. It's crazy to look back. Last year, this time, we were around 15, 16 episodes. And this was really a vision for myself to share the ideas and things that I have experienced in my life the last decade and just really just share with the world. And I wasn't really sure on what was going to happen, what was the feedback going to be, and any of those things. So my intentions were to just really just share my own perspective on a lot of things that I have done, from inner child work to ego work, investments, and anything and everything in the middle. And of course, the listeners, you guys know I've been bringing on guests that I feel like would have some value to the audience. And so the last couple of weeks, I've done about 20, 30 guest interviews, and I have about 30 more for next year. And it's been amazing. It's been beautiful because I'm getting to learn things. I'm going with my own curiosity and what's on my heart, and the questions that I ask, it leads to some beautiful answers from the individuals that I've had on the show so far. And today I have another special guest, someone that when I looked at on her Instagram and checked out some of her videos, I felt very aligned with the things that she was sharing. And I felt like that the audience is also going to take something away from it. And also it could just be for entertainment purposes. And I feel like she's going to have some value. And I'm going to share with you guys a couple of things about her, who she is. She goes by the name of Felicia. And I just want to say a couple of things about her so you guys get an idea of what Felicia and who Felicia is. So Felicia is a TV producer turned self-trust and empowerment coach. And she is here to help people have the tools they need to love themselves, understand themselves, empower themselves, and trust themselves in a way they never have before. She provides you with everything you need to become the best version of you for you. Thank you for jumping onto the show there, Felicia.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Okay, the first thing that came to my mind, as I was just reading even those little things about you, what led you to, leave, let's say, what you were doing before to get into an industry of, love and trust and all those things that you're doing these days? Like, how did you get down this path?
Well, through my own experiences of not loving and trusting, and really knowing myself. It was just kind of doing, society makes you feel like you need to do certain things. You go in a certain chronological order and you do all the things. And even though, maybe you look great on the outside, sometimes it's not aligned on the inside. Yeah. And then you kind of get to this point where you're like, what? I did everything I should have done. Why is this not working? Yeah. Why am I not happy? Like, why do I not like who I see in the mirror? And it's because we're not really taught to go in and love ourselves. We're just like taught how to look good on the outside to society's expectations of us. So that's kind of where I started my self-love journey. It's the ego and the inner child and everything you talked about, but mostly just figuring out what it is that I like, and following that and being brave in my decision making. And then I was like, well, I just got to teach other people how to do this too.
No, that's interesting. And what you shared with me there is, I feel like so many of us, especially individuals that are 20, 30, 40 years old, like we grew up in this world where, our parents and environment, society told us this is the way to do it. And you're going to be okay. Go to school, get a good job, find a partner, and work 40 years of your life. And like, you're going to be okay. And it's interesting, myself as well. I did that. I went to, I barely finished school, but like I followed those, I had a good job. I, made six figures before I was 20 years old. And I was like, things were good. Yeah. At early 20s, I kind of found out I'm like, okay, even though I'm making all this money and I'm doing all these things that I was told that I should do, that I'm going to be happy, but I'm not happy in the inside. And then you get into relationships. Like for myself, I got in relationships where things came up that, I realized that I'm not like a finished product. The insecurities and the things that come in an intimate relationship made me realize, like, holy crap, the work that you have done so far, you're not done. You're not a finished product. You got to work on yourself, which led to self-love and all the work that I'm doing these days. So as I was listening to your story, it's interesting, like, I feel like there's not that many conversations happening about self-love, like loving yourself, what loving yourself looks like.
Yeah.
And I made a couple of videos this morning about it. And literally, like, I feel like that's something that I want to embody more and like share more, because loving myself and respecting myself and learning in all the ways to love myself has led to some of the most beautiful things that have happened in my life in the last 3-4 years, right? Amazing opportunities, amazing everything. So, but then I find it interesting that, like, how come nobody's talking about this? Like,
Yeah.
why are people out there not like, there should be like university courses on this, you know?
I agree. They really should be, because then when it happens and you're just hit this wall where, something's not lining up for you, you feel like something's wrong with you. And you're just like,
Yeah.
where did I go wrong? Like, I shouldn't have, like, I should be happy. Like, I should be happy. And, you share these things with your parents and people that are older, and they're like, oh, like, tough love if you're not happy, like, whatever, you just still got to pay the bills and you still got to do this. And they don't really, that generation never valued happiness. And I do actually see it a lot more in millennials and like Gen Z, like this new, they really do value their work-life balance. They value their mental health a lot more. Like, there's this whole epidemic happening where people are not going back to work, or like there's like a low in terms of like employment. No one wants to be employed by people that don't value mental health, that don't put their employees first. And it's the Gen Z millennial crowd that are strong arming this. And I think that that's beautiful to see.
No, it's true. It's interesting, as you were saying that, I feel like our parents, they just trusted the system, because like they just thought like the system is not gonna disappoint us, because they didn't disappoint their parents. But I feel like the system, like a lot of people, I feel like weren't aware of what it all, like, if like the system and government, all these things were actually supporting us, or really there for our best of our intentions. And I feel like a lot of people are starting to realize the last decade or so, where they're seeing that at the end of the day, you got to be fully in control of yourself, and you got to fully put the time into yourself, and you got to fully discover what's happiness, what's success, and what is it that you want, or what is it that you don't want. So for yourself, when you're working with clients, right? So how do you teach self-love? Like, I'm curious to know, like, how does that even, because I feel like somebody would have to be aware that they don't love themselves yet in order to listen to that advice and then start implementing, right? I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on that.
I don't think that they don't necessarily not like or love themselves. I think that it's just people who are willing to put in the work for improving the things that they do. So instead of looking in the mirror and tearing yourself up, like my skin sucks, like I hate the shape of my eyebrows, like I'm fat, like I've gained weight, like all of that stuff. It's like looking internally and realizing that, yeah, I mean, how you feel on the inside does reflect on the outside. And so if you're constantly saying mean things to yourself, and we all do it, then that determines how you feel about yourself. And it's the same as and if you feel shitty about yourself, you're going to make shittier decisions. That's what's going to make you to go get a pizza and eat it by the TV because you're feeling like you're having a shitty day. Yeah. And it probably all started because you didn't say nice things to yourself. So it's like, what if you woke up in the morning and you said something nice to yourself that didn't have anything to do with your looks? One of the things that I like to embody is like practicing, like writing down things that you really like about yourself. Like every day, write down one thing that you really like about yourself. And even if it's the same thing every day for like a week, eventually you'll start writing more things that you like about yourself. And then going back and reading it and then seeing like, wow, like maybe I'm funny and I'm nice and like I care about other people and I put other people's feelings first, and like that is important to me. I'm a hard worker, I'm determined, I'm ambitious, like I'm resilient, like all these little things that like add up that go beyond your looks. So it turns into like, well, of course I like me because I'm all of these things and like I know me, and it makes it a very solid ground for you. If something in your world shakes that or rocks that, or someone questions it, then you start to question yourself. You don't really question yourself as much because you're just like, no, I know who I am and I've got this and I've got my back, kind of thing.
Interesting. I feel like loving ourselves helps us become like whole, like it's like we are always growing up, depends on the childhood that you may add, but I feel like a lot of us, we grow up where we are either people pleasing, or it just matters a lot what somebody else thinks of us. And I think it comes from being wounded, as where you were always looking for our parents' approval. We're always trying to, prove them wrong, or do things to make them be proud of us. And literally, this literally just came to my mind, that it feels like that when we start to love ourselves, we start to become whole, and we start to realize that, like, I don't need anybody else's, approval. Like, my own approval is what matters. And I'm sharing a personal experience here. Like, I was in a relationship and a year ago or so where, I was seeking a lot of validation and, compliments and a lot of things from, like, externally from the partner. And as I start to do inner child work, and I'm very big on inner child work, and it's interesting that I start to realize that the validation, the compliments, the credibility, the things that I was seeking from my partner, I was able to give myself to myself. And it was beautiful. And what has led to that, and what has happened since then, is that I've started to attract a very higher caliber of women in my life that are honoring me and respecting me more, and respecting my boundaries. And it's crazy to me that it all started with me choosing to spend time with me and loving parts of myself that weren't loved the way they wanted to be in those early days, right?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on inner child work? Like, what do you do a lot of that with your clients, and like, what are your thoughts on that? I'm curious to know.
I don't do a whole lot of inner child work.
Okay.
It is important. It is important to know, like, where it stemmed from, and like the more that you think about why you have like the tendencies that you have, where in your childhood did you not get that as a kid? I think it's important to fix that part of you for other people. But even if you weren't diving into inner child work, I do feel like you could kind of figure that one out through self-reflection. In very much like, instead of being like it's like the whole codependency thing, like that was a big one. For me, like always needing to like fix other people, if like they had a problem, I felt like I needed to fix it for them. And then not really letting people just be themselves, I suppose, and like fix problems on their own. A big one is like my nervous system would be shot whenever someone would be like mad. I would just think that, like, oh my God, like, one, they're either mad at me, and that's the codependency, or I like just stop being mad, like figure it out kind of thing, where it's like other. And I do feel like some of that stem from your childhood, but I don't really work with my clients on it as much as I just like say, like, well, what was the first time that has happened to you? When's the first time that you remember feeling like you disappointed someone, or you let someone down? Or I'm just using that as an example. And then you do go back and like try to rewrite the memory as best as you can, or saying like, I forgive you, I love you, like I've got you. A big thing that I work on with my clients is your love language. So if you have like a love language in a relationship, are you quality time? Is it affirmations? Is it acts of service, or whatever you expect other people in order to like please you, I suppose, or like make you happier? How can you do that for yourself? So if like mine's quality time and mine is words of affirmation, like how can I talk nicely to myself? How can I have quality time with myself? If it's acts of service, like how can I do stuff around the house? Like, can I hire a cleaner? Can I allow things to be done for me? And then when you realize that you don't need someone else to do those things, but you can like figure it out on your own, then that builds that self-trust with you, and then in the relationship as well. And another cool thing that I like really got me started on all of this is because I think we all grow into this mistake of going into relationships, any type of relationship, and thinking that they need to be that person for everything. you know, you start a business and they need to be the one that helps you brainstorm all of this stuff. You get into like a work problem and then they need to help you figure out that issue. You get into a fight with a friend and you vent to them about it. And it's like, anytime, like that one person isn't supposed to be that person for everything, you know. That's why you have business mentors. That's why you have therapists. Like that's why you have these things. And the more you can rely on your network of people to support you, then you realize that you're just a human trying your best, and you don't need to share every aspect of your life with your partners. And I think that that takes that pressure off of your partner as well.
Yeah, and it's, you know, it's interesting. I think as we get in relationships, and let's say we analyze other relationships, and it sounds very weird when the way I just said that, but I mean, like, if you look at a lot of healthy relationships, right, or you read a lot of articles on, you know, those articles like 10 things that, you know, help this couple stay together for 80 years or 40 years. Like, if you look into those things, a lot of those healthy relationships are exactly the way you mentioned, where you're not looking at that person for everything, right? Like, you have your group of friends that you can go spend time with. You have your therapist where you can share things that's on your mind that's bothering you. And I think relationships stop working when we start to look at that person like, you are it, like, you're the reason for my happiness, you're the reason for this, and like, I need you for this. And like, and then when that person, obviously they're human as well, and they can't be there for you, then all of a sudden you're fully like in this position where you're not happy and you feel like you're not getting what you want. But really, I think a healthy relationship is where those things are established, where like, okay, it's me, it's you, and there's this entity, the relationship, and I must work on me, you must work on you, and we must consciously also work on this entity, which is the relationship. And understanding that I have needs, I have these things, but like, I'm going to go to my friends and I'm going to go to family for this. And just, I think open communication is one of the biggest things, you know, where being able to communicate, because even myself, I feel like there was a lot of times in my relationships where like I'm playing this, I'm not consciously playing the game, but it's like where I'm assuming my partner should read my mind. Like, they should know this, they should know that, they should like,
Yeah.
really, I think it's like, how can you expect people to read your minds? And I feel like that's helped me a lot, that awareness of where I'm like, now when I'm in a relationship and I'm like open communication, we're discussing our needs and we're sharing things that's on our mind, we're sharing things that bother us, and we're like open communication. I'm very big on that. And then, you know, when you do have those conversations, everything, you know, everything comes to the, I'm not saying it's going to fix it, but like having conversations with your partner really does help bring more solutions into whatever issues that are coming up, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I like the way you mentioned about inner child, like where you're like, yeah, I don't really work with my clients like specifically on inner child, but I ask these questions that leads to, you know, realizing that there was that inner child, that little child part of you. This is how they look at this situation. This is why this is happening, which kind of reveals to them that there's that part of them they should acknowledge, or they should love, or they should, you know, just do the self-reflection, right? So what's a tool that you share with your clients, or that they start to do? And when I say tools, I mean, I'm thinking of stuff like deep breathing exercises, gratitude, meditation, cold showers. What are some things that you share, or like your clients start to do once they're, let's say, in your program and they're working with you?
It's a lot of talk type of therapy. Big one is gratitude for sure. Saying the things that they like about themselves. Mirror work, saying them, like, when you write it out, like, say it to yourself. Like, look at yourself in the mirror and say those things to yourself. I'm more centered around people who have careers and stuff like that, who might be a little bit more drained because they're giving so much of their things to their work. They might feel like they're people pleasing too much. They might feel like they have imposter syndrome. They might feel like they're not allowed to set boundaries at work. They're not allowed to negotiate things. So I center a lot around self-worth and, you know, practicing setting boundaries, practicing saying like, oh, I have time for a meeting at 5, but I have to get off at this time, you know, and I have dinner with my family tonight. Like, I have this tonight. Or speaking up in meetings, like, you know, having that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 rule, like, put your hand up in a meeting, like realizing that everyone doesn't know what they're doing. Like you're not any less competent than anyone else in the room. These are really big, important things, but a really big thing that I touch on is something that I call the Fab Four. And it's 4 things that you can do every day that's yours. And it's everything that you can do to make you feel like you have more control over your day than not. Because the people, again, that I'm working with are people that are high achievers, probably have corporate careers, as well as like maybe a side hustle as well. So a lot of the times I could feel like they're giving more than they are actually doing. And then that leads to autopilot, which then leads to non-fulfillment, because you're just like, where did my week go? Like, I feel like I've done nothing this week to make me happy. So 4 things that you can do every single day that can make you be present and make you realize that this is your moment. And it can be super small things, like not looking at your phone while you have coffee with your spouse in the morning, not bringing your phone on your walk to get your coffee at 3 p.m., calling your best friend, your mom, whatever, during your work day, like checking in and having that conversation with them. Even if you're working, like just taking 15 minutes out of your day to like do that instead. Having a bath, but not letting anyone disturb you while you have your bath, like little things that you can do, play with your dog, I don't know, but things that you could do to be present in the moment and make you feel happier. And then they'll trick your mind to think that you have more control over your day than you do. So when you're sitting there thinking, oh, I'm on autopilot too much, just be intentional. What are 4 things that you want to do today that could make you happier that day?
That's interesting. When you're just sharing all those things, one of the things that came to my mind, and it seems like it comes up in a lot of the podcasts that I do, where this seems like where you're teaching, and it's like paying attention. Even these 4, the Fab Four that you just shared, which I'm very grateful for you sharing, that is that it seems like even that practice is supposed to help you focus on just being present. Like be present in the moment. And, whether you're walking your dog or you're taking a bath undisturbed, it's like the point of all these exercises and these tools are to help you be present, especially like you mentioned, you are centered around helping women and everyone that's, career oriented, and they're busy. They're already like just making a lot of decisions. And these Fab Four is really, I feel like when you were just sharing that, I'm like, it's to help them be present. And once you get into that present moment, you can pay attention to what comes up, right? And acknowledge those feelings that comes up. And seems like a lot of times I have had this conversation where the point of all this is to just be present, because once you're present, you can start to see a lot of things that are happening are not happening. Like, are you setting boundaries and all those things, right? And since we are on the topic of boundaries, so I'm 31 years old, and only in the last 3 or 6 months, I've started to build boundaries, set boundaries, and understand what is it that I'm okay with, what is it that I'm not okay with, what can I tolerate, what can I not tolerate, and not just in my relationship, but in my business, in my relationships, like my siblings and all those things. And it's just interesting. Like, it blows my mind that I didn't know anything about building boundaries. And even to get deeper, I was resistant to the idea of building boundaries. Like,
it's hard to make boundaries.
Like, it blows my mind that I'm resisting the idea of doing things that's good for me. Where do you think that comes from?
It's people pleasing. You feel like you don't want to upset people, especially people that, a lot of times you have to set boundaries with the people that we're closest with. And it's because they're so used to treating you a certain way. They're so used to seeing you a certain way that when you become this new person that puts their foot down and says, I'm not going to be this person anymore, it shakes things up a little bit, right? And it might change their opinion of you. And a lot of us don't want that to happen. A lot of us want to grow. We have this need to grow as humans, but we don't want to outgrow people that are supposed to mean a lot to us. And because the idea of that is scary to anyone. So I think people have a hard time putting down boundaries because they don't want to upset the people that they might be putting that boundary towards.
No, that's true. And boundaries and self-love, like, how correlated are they? Like, what comes to your mind when you think of those 2 things together?
I mean, they're very correlated. I mean, how you treat you is how other people will treat you. and then also onto the phrase, how you do one thing is how you do everything. So in terms of you saying you're trying to set boundaries in your personal life, and you're trying, or maybe you've mastered that and you're trying to learn how to do it in your business, and you're trying to learn how to do it in other areas too. I found that I wasn't putting boundaries up at work, and it would lead me to be burnt out. It would lead me to not know how to say no to things. And then they would just put more on my plate. It would lead other people to think that it was okay to like message me really late and stuff like that, just to like solve problems. So when I wanted to get clear on where I could put boundaries at work, I realized I wasn't putting boundaries up in any area of my life. So on top of work, I now have, my family members calling me and being the middleman between them. And I have, my partner calling and like wanting me to solve problems whenever they wanted me to solve problems. And it's just turned into all, like, my life felt like a mess because I was just not letting me be me and enjoy my time with me. So in order to really set boundaries, you have to acknowledge that like your mental health is important too. How you spend your day is important too. Your commitment to growth has to be stronger than other people's small opinion of you at the moment. And so putting that boundary in, like, I'm not going to be a middleman for the family anymore. I'm not able to talk to you between 9 to 5 about your problems, partner. That is nighttime stuff. Work after 5 p.m. that is partner time. So I'm not willing to talk to you about that. Like, I make dinner with my family and this is how that goes. Like, I'm not willing to take on another project. I want to be paid more if I'm going to be taking on that project. I want someone under me that can take on more responsibilities. If you're putting this under my plate, I need an assistant. Like, these things that you can say in all areas of your life. And you have to remember too, I hear so much about, you got to put up a boundary, you got to put up a wall, you got to do that. And like, while you do have to do that, it's short term, right? It's never a long-term thing unless you make it one. But putting up boundaries doesn't have to be this crazy thing. It's just a temporary thing for you. So if you think about it, how you're doing it for you, you're not doing it for the other person, you're doing it for you. So when you ask with self-love and boundaries, like, you're doing it because you love yourself, and that's why you're doing it. And it doesn't have to be a forever thing. Eventually they'll get the point that you're not a counselor, and if the family needs to figure something out, they'll figure it out between each other, and they don't need you to do it. And then it just makes it a better place. It doesn't mean you're not going to speak to the family anymore. It just means that when you're starting to talk about this person, or when you're starting to talk about this person, I don't want to be involved in it anymore. And that's how it is. So when you think of boundaries as like, I'm doing this for me, has nothing to do, like, it's not, what is that saying? Like, it's me, it's not you. Like, that's when you look at it like that, then that's easier to set those boundaries.
Yeah. And it was interesting as you were saying all those things, it almost answered a question that I had in my mind on how do you go about setting boundaries. And I feel like everything that you just shared was a great piece on how to kind of go about that. And it's interesting. And I want to share this personal experience. So like, when I started to set boundaries, I would, like, let's say I don't want to be the middleman. I call it the family lawyer, but like, because for my family, I'm like, things break out, and I'm the one comes and just controls the chaos and kind of brings everyone back to, like a place where, nothing is a place of peace, right? And it was interesting as I started to make the decision that I'm like, I'm not that guy anymore. Like, I got things to focus on my own stuff. I got businesses, I got things that I got to make happen. It's interesting that, like, I would feel bad. I'm like, well, my little sister, well, like my mom, like, she needs me. And, boundaries, like, this sounds like I'm just being mean. Like, I'm being too much, or like, oh, like and I also add like, and I'm being very raw here. So like, oh, like you published a book and your podcast is growing and your business is doing well and like you're making money. So you're starting to not care for these people that were in your life the last 2-3 years when you were, broke and you were going through things and I had to really do some, like reflection where like, it's like, this is not mean. I'm not doing something cruel. I'm honoring myself. I have these things and I have this amount of energy, and this energy right now is, half of it is being wasted towards these things that has nothing to do with my own well-being, my own growth, my own mental health. And so, yeah, like, as you're listening to this podcast and you're like that, either you're building boundaries, either you are thinking about building boundaries, like, it's very normal for a lot of these things to come up where, because we spend most of our lives people pleasing, a lot of us. So when you start to protect your time and become strategic and calculated on how you spend your time and who you give this time and energy to, it's very normal to have all these things come up. And I'm just here to tell you that, self-reflection, sitting with yourself, paying attention to everything comes up. And then also just realizing that you're doing this for yourself. You have got to this stage because your time is not being respected. Your energy is not being respected. There's a lot of times you're doing things that you're not doing for your own self. So just remember that, and that's to realize that building these boundaries is only good for you, only going to help you become better, healthier, which in return, those people that you love and you want to be there for, you're only going to be able to give them more of you when you do set the boundaries and really do honor yourself. So you come back, and then when you go back to your mom and your sister, you're able to give them more of your attention because you're more whole. And I feel like it sounds weird as I'm saying it, but I promise you from experience that as I started to build boundaries, as I started to respect myself, and it's kind of trickled down on my business partners and siblings in a healthy way, because they're being exposed to, like, wow, okay, I guess he's right. There was a lot of times I was depending on him, and I shouldn't have. And me depending on him is kind of saying a lot about me and how dependent I am on this individual, and I should work on my own independency, right? So I believe that the people that are meant to be in your life, they will be, even though if you start building boundaries, they will only respect you more, and they will only do their own work even on a deeper level, which makes those relationships even more beautiful when you come back as a whole, right? Wow, we're having some good conversation. Like, you're sharing some really good things. So I seen on your Instagram a post that are you married, or you're in a relationship, right?
Yeah, I'm in a relationship.
Yeah, because I seen you post something about my favorite wedding date, or wedding dates were back, or something like that, and I seen that. So what do you think of relationships overall? Like, do you feel like I feel like relationships are the most beautiful thing ever, in the sense of, like, it's especially a conscious, aware relationship where two people are both committed to doing the work, and they're committed to building something beautiful, and they're very well aware that it's not going to be easy, but they're committed to it. So that's my thoughts on relationships. But I hear a lot of people that say, like, monogamy is not for human beings and relationships are this. So I asked this question where it's just a general question. Like, what are your thoughts about relationships overall?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have a thought on relationships too much. I never really thought about it. What works for me is monogamy, and that works for me and my partner. But I can't say that how someone else is wrong or anything like that. I mean, how other people want to live, as long as they're both on the same page, and you set those boundaries at the beginning. Clarifying what's cheating, what where are our stances in a relationship. I do think you have to be on the same page, core values. In terms of doing the work and not doing the work, I mean, yeah, you want to be committed with someone who's committed to you in a relationship, who fights healthy, who shows up for themselves, who takes initiative and ambition. But I mean, I've been in relationships with people who aren't super spiritual, and that's something that that changed for me over time, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I need them to change too, as long as, like, who you are and they respect that part of how you're thinking and all of that stuff, and as long as your core values stay the same, then I think that being different in a relationship isn't so bad. I mean, you get people who are long-term relationships, and I'm sure there's going to be people listening that, like, met someone when they were both a certain way, and then one person kind of grows and one person, it does kind of feel like someone either stays the same or they're not growing the same. But it doesn't have to be an be all end all. Like, you can have one person committed to growth, and they can just lead by example. And if they are breaking boundaries or not respecting your growth, or not on the same page as you, then it is time to leave. But
Mm.
so
Yeah, no, I think what you shared there was what I took away from it was beautiful. And you're right. Of course, there's no right or wrong. And I shared it a lot on this podcast on everything, right? We all have our own personal experiences, and it's for everyone. Different things work for different people. But what I took away from what you were sharing was as long as you are sharing boundaries and you're sharing your, what works and what doesn't, and what is cheating, what is this, like you shared that. And I thought that was so beautiful, like having the conversations, like actually open about what things look like for you, what a relationship looks like for you, what does, a great sex life looks like for you, what does a great, just like, I like that. Like, it's like being open and talking about your needs, your wants, and what things look like for you in an ideal relationship. And then the partner also does that. This is what things look like for me in an ideal relationship. And I think as long as that open communication is happening, it's all good, right? Yeah, that's beautiful. And I ask a random question every time on the podcast as well. And my random question today that just came to my mind is, what are your thoughts on cryptocurrency? And you can say, like, I don't even know what it is.
Anything about it. I don't know anything about it.
Okay, no, that's so awesome, because I was about to be like, if you don't know anything about it, you can just say, like, I have no idea what's going on. And I asked that because there's so many people. I feel like every time I open my Instagram, or after I open my like Facebook, and I'm not actually looking for information on it. So it's not like the ads that are hitting me with it, like as if I'm looking for it, right?
Yeah.
But like, I feel like everybody's like doing something with it. Like my Facebook, there are friends that are either like buying their own cryptocurrency, or like planning on mining cryptocurrency, or like, I feel like just everywhere I'm seeing it. So I end up just asking that questions because I'm just always curious. I'm like, and then it's interesting actually, like the way you answered, because I find it interesting on individuals that don't even, or like much not aware of it, or don't even really are putting energy into it, because it's just another, and it's like, it tells me that a lot of people in my world are in this right now. And what I actually do on my Facebook, I will go and change my news feed every couple of weeks. So where you can actually make a custom news feed to where I'm only going to see these 15, 20 people's feed for the next, for as long as I change it. So just now it's like, I need to maybe change my news feed, because look, there's people in the world that like, they don't know what's going on. Like, it's all good. Like, I feel like I'm getting too corrupted. Not, it sounds like a funny word, but I feel like I'm just verbally getting rained on with like cryptocurrency this, cryptocurrency this, when I'm over there making videos and then talking about self-love and inner child work and everything, right? So interesting. And another question, this is actually one of the last questions. I know we both have to go here. So in your program, when you're helping your clients, is there anything on like diet, like like what to eat? Is there any talk like where you putting the right food in your body, and how important it is to put the right food in your body? Is there any top conversations around that, or is there just a little bit of like, it's important, but I'm not a nutritionist, so I'm not going to give you meal plans, but like, is there any like even just talks about that? I'm just curious to know.
I think it all just comes down to, I do try to get people to ask this question to themselves every day, and I do it too. If I love myself 1% more today, how would I show up? And if that also means like not putting shit food into your body, but that might also mean fucking putting shit food into your body. And like, it's like everyone's different. I am not a nutritionist. I will never preach, nutrition, but keeping your word to yourself is one of the biggest ways to build self-trust and self-love. So if you tell yourself, I'm not going to eat dairy for 30 days, don't eat dairy for 30 days. If you tell yourself you're going to, cut out bad carbs, and cut out bad carbs, and then you'll see the self-love and self-trust within yourself grow. I would never tell you what to eat. That's totally on you. But if you're eating food that makes you feel like shit, then don't eat that food. And that's more where I gear my programs around, is like, if you loved yourself 1% more, how would you show up? And then you write out, even at the beginning of every month, which is what we're at right now, is the perfect way to like, I want to feel better about myself, so I'm going to cut out blank. Well, if you're going to cut out blank, then do it. And then you'll see your commitment to yourself grow. And it could be something so small, like, I was going to say sugar, but that's actually a really big one. It could be something so small, like remembering to take my vitamins every day. Like that's something that a lot of people forget to do. So it's like, if that's your commitment to yourself, taking your supplement, then doing that.
No, that's awesome. And I just wanted to point out what Felicia just mentioned, that, if you tell yourself you're going to do something for 30 days, do it, because that process of actually doing what you told yourself you're going to do is what builds self-confidence, builds self-trust, self-esteem, and integrity overall. Integrity is telling yourself you're going to do something and actually doing it. And that process of it actually builds self-trust, self-love, self-confidence. And yeah, that was amazing. I think that's a great point that I want to finish on. And lastly, I just want to say, Felicia, thank you so much for jumping on and just sharing your thoughts, your views, and the things that you do with your own clients. I'm sure everyone listening to the podcast are going to take a lot away from it. And just lastly, where can they find you? So I'm going to put your information where they can find you in the details section of the podcast. So let everyone know where they can find Felicia.
Sure. It's just by Felicia Baird, B-Y, no E. Felicia Baird. You're going to link below, but mostly on Instagram.
Okay.
I do have, I am growing my TikTok. So if you want to follow me along there, that's cool too. And that's about it. And I do have a really cool self-love toolkit that I have that's free. And it's like a great way to, it's like really dive into the beginning parts of loving yourself and trusting yourself. And I am running this promo in December that if you download that, it'll take you to a page where you can book a session with me to work with me for a week. And you can that's at a discounted rate too. So you guys can check that out, but that's mostly it.
Awesome. And actually another question as well, because this podcast is going to get released the first month of 2022. So everyone that listens to it around that time, that free toolkit for the self-love, will it still be free?
Yep.
Okay. Yep. Awesome.
That's always free. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, guys, you listened, there's a free toolkit she has that you can use, download, and then it helps you the process of loving yourself. So I would highly suggest that. I'm going to put Felicia's details in the details section so you guys can find her, follow her on Instagram. Feel free to ask her any questions. And lastly, I just want to say, Felicia, thank you so much for jumping onto the podcast, sharing everything that you shared, and I appreciate it so much.
Thanks for having me. This is fun.
Awesome. Guys, lastly, as we finish this podcast, my intentions that I want to set with you is that you just put on 45 minutes of your time listening to this podcast, giving your most valuable energy to me and Felicia. So lastly, what I will say is that not to only listen to this for entertainment purposes. I know me and Felicia have great voices, but I would also suggest that you take something away from this and start to implement it in your day-to-day life and start to see those results. So take action on an idea that you heard in this podcast. And lastly, I just want to say thank you guys. I'm super grateful to have a platform where I'm able to share my voice and share the things that comes. And until next time, stay an aware alpha.